After staying alive and reproducing, what's the most important thing we humans do? That's a great question. It's also a poem that I wrote. I'm an experimental poet, and we try to come up with new kinds of poetry. And that's one of my question poems, which are composed entirely of questions. And the reason I write those is because I think that after staying alive and reproducing, the most important thing we do is ask questions. And here's why. Questions have played a central role in how we think ever since Socrates came up with his Socratic method, in which we learn more and more about a topic by asking one question after another until we run out of questions. And today, neuroscientists are beginning to understand that there are good reasons why we ask so many questions. Because our brains are constantly building models of the world, ourselves, and others. Those models are like our working hypotheses about how things really are, and we use them to help us navigate our way through life. And one of the main ways we test and improve our mental models is by asking questions. And if you get really lucky and you ask the right person the right questions, it can be like stepping into a whole new world. And I did get really lucky when I became a teacher in the inner city. I'd worked on Wall Street for 25 years and felt it was time to give something back. So I got a degree in urban education, where they taught us that the best teachers take what their students already know and use that as Velcro to hook our new lessons onto. But when I got a job teaching economics to inner city high school students, I realized I had no idea what they already knew. I had no Velcro. So the first thing I did when I started teaching was ask them, what do you know about the economy? And I thought what they were going to talk about was my mental model of the inner city, which I'd always just assumed was accurate, that there was a lot of unemployment and poverty, very few services, and economic conditions were generally pretty grim. But instead, one student told the class that he was the local turkey parts guy. Every Wednesday after school, he got in his van, and he drove from New Jersey way out to western Pennsylvania, to where the turkey farms were. And he bought up all the turkey legs and wings that the farmers were left with after the big food companies had taken all the breast meat. He packed that up in ice chests, drove back home, and he spent Thursday mornings driving around delivering turkey parts to a list of regular customers. And for that, he pocketed about as much as I took home each week. Then other students started sharing what they knew about the economy, and they were describing lots of small businesses run by people from their neighborhood who provided all kinds of services, like child and elder care, food preparation, cleaning, doing hair and nails, transportation, renting out rooms in their apartments, repair and maintenance. Now I had some Velcro. But I also had something else, because now I was the one getting the education. I had no idea there were so many entrepreneurs in the inner city. Nobody did, because very few of those businesses were registered with anybody who might have wanted to license or regulate or tax them, so there was no data on them. And without data, there was nothing for urban economists or sociologists to study and write about. So this huge fact about inner city life was completely invisible, but it became visible to me because I asked that one little question. So our mental models get bigger and better by asking questions, especially when we're asking people who are different from us and who know things that are different from what we know. But asking questions is also the way we discover how much we have in common with each other, especially when we're convinced we have very little in common. And I say that from personal experience because for my New Year's resolution a couple of years ago, I contacted 5 lobbyists who were each trying to get legislation passed that I disagreed with. And I invited them to have coffee with me because I honestly couldn't understand how thoughtful and open-minded people could look at all the facts and reach the conclusions they did. And I wanted to understand that in case I was missing something. They all accepted my invitation, and at each one of those meetings, 5 out of 5, as I asked my questions, I was shocked at how many really important points we actually agreed on. So, for example, one of the meetings was about gun control. One of us was in favor, the other opposed. But we both agreed on some really key points, like not everyone should be allowed to own a gun. We need a stronger system of background checks. Not everyone who owns a gun needs to have an assault rifle. And there were others. None of those meetings made me completely change my mind about any of the issues. But once I saw that my mental models intersected in a lot more places than I realized with the mental models of the people I disagreed with, I had to admit that their opinions were reasonable too. So, asking questions makes us smarter, helps us understand each other better. Two great outcomes. But I'm starting to get worried that in contemporary life, and especially in our online lives, we're becoming estranged from questions in a couple of ways. First, what do we do when we're online? Text, post, share, like, message, tweet. We're being trained not to ask questions, but to make statements, short statements. And that is not how we test and improve our mental models. I really worry that all this statement making might be crowding out our question asking, so that instead of exploring what we have in common, we're stuck focusing on our differences, because that's a recipe for polarized opinions and a toxic public discourse. Another way we're becoming estranged from questions is that when we're online, we're being subtly nudged into sameness. The internet companies who don't explicitly charge us for their services have a very simple business model. They try to keep us on their sites for as long as possible. That's how they learn enough about us to be able to precision advertise to us, which is how they make their money. And the way they keep us on their sites is by embedding us in sameness. We are naturally drawn to what feels familiar, but when we're online, this can be taken to an unnatural extreme, because those internet companies enable us, in fact, they encourage us to curate entire worlds for ourselves, full of people who share the exact same news, conversations, ideas, books, movies, music. Even our online searching, a search is supposed to be like a little intellectual adventure, a question that sets us off on a quest for new insights. But search algorithms take our past searches into account when they decide what to show us. So to some extent, we're being led back into what we already know, back into what feels familiar. And the effect of being embedded in all that sameness is that even when we do ask a question, we probably already know what the answer is going to be. And that's like not asking a question at all. And we really don't want to become estranged from questions. And if you watch science or nature programs on TV, you probably know why. Something like 99% of species go extinct because they did not evolve the tools they needed to survive and thrive in their environment. We humans are a very young species, and it's still an open question whether the tools we've evolved, like the ability to ask questions, will allow us to survive and thrive. We're only 300,000 years old. Sharks have been around for more than 400 million years, and we know their tools work. They are highly effective underwater killing machines. We are question-asking machines, and it's just not clear yet whether that's going to be enough. But to even stand a chance, we have to at least use the tools we've been given. If we're not asking questions, our mental models stagnate. We become more likely to misunderstand the world, ourselves, and each other, and less likely to be able to navigate our way through whatever life might be throwing at us. And that would be happening at a time when our biggest challenges, like climate change and pandemics, affect the entire species. So they have to be addressed as a species, using all the tools we've inherited. The bottom line is, our best shot at avoiding extinction, ask a lot of questions. I thought poetry could be a powerful way to remind people how important questions are and how invigorating it can be to ask them. So I organized question poetry events where groups of people read one of my question poems and then had a dialogue among themselves about how they'd answer the questions being raised in the poem. I partnered with colleges and libraries, an outdoor art festival, and other venues who advertised and hosted the events. Lots of people came, as many as 50 at a time. And I'll give you a few examples of the kinds of question poems that seem to get people talking a lot. These are 3 really short, one-question poems. We also used longer ones. Is there anything that everyone everywhere would agree with? Can facts be hate speech? Is it more important to start big things or to finish little things? The participants at these events were obviously enjoying themselves. They were engaged and animated and respectful and constructive, and I think that's because questions just bring out the best in us. You know, when someone asks us a question, they're deliberately making themselves vulnerable. They're taking a risk. They're opening up a space in themselves, and they're inviting us to help them fill it back up again. And when someone shows us that much trust, we instinctively want to respond with that same generosity of spirit. We want to try to answer their question thoughtfully and graciously. We're going to be measured in what we say and careful about how we say it. And I want our public discourse to be more like those dialogues. And I think it will be when we spend less time making statements at each other and more time asking each other questions. The thing I like most about question poetry is that everyone can do it. And you should. It's easy. Pick a topic you think is interesting and important. Come up with a few questions that'll help someone else tell you what they think about the topic. And then find someone you don't ordinarily talk with, maybe somebody at work or from around town, or find that policy expert whose opinion is different from yours, and start a dialogue with them by asking them your questions. I think you'll find that the people you approach will be flattered. And you'll be glad you took the initiative, because nature tends to reward us by making us feel good when we do something that's necessary for survival, like eating or sleeping or sex or asking questions. So how can you help ensure that the tools we've inherited as a species will work for us? Thank you.